Okay, so welcome everybody to the July meeting. Seems like I say this all the time, but anyways, so this meeting today we have quite a few items, but most of them are relatively short, and for some reason a different color here. But anyways, so I'll give just a one slide thing about EV everywhere. There's some development there. And then Mike will talk about forbidden fruit, and what he's talking about there is EVs that are available outside of Canada but aren't available here. Okay. Then I'm going to briefly talk about the new ZEVIP round and what the rules are there, because they're somewhat different from the previous rounds. Then I'm going to do a presentation I've done before, and some of you have seen some bits of it, especially if you look at some other stuff I did elsewhere. But the point is to talk about the energy transition and how fast it's likely to happen. And I think there's some interesting facts for you there that you could use in the future as when you're having discussions with people. Then we'll do, like usual, the news with Lawrence and past and future events. Okay, so briefly, those of you who have expressed interest in joining the EV Everywhere program, you should have received, and if you have a Kia or Hyundai, you should have gotten a message asking you to subscribe, right? So if you can, please subscribe. That's the only way that we're going to be able to get things worked out, right, ironed out, and get them to actually deploy this as a real program going forward. So, so they've done a lot of changes to the app, and actually I showed it, I think last time I showed some screens, right? But so the app is getting better, but you know, the more we could do to help them, the better it is. Okay.
Is that only for Hydro Ottawa or Hydro One as well?
Hydro Ottawa. Okay. Now that being said, technically, if you're in Hydro One, it doesn't matter. You could still participate, but you never get any. You wouldn't be able to link your Hydro One account, and you wouldn't get the. So they give you financial benefits. The first thing, one thing I forgot to mention is, on my last bill, I saved $65 by participating in this thing.
Right.
So yeah.
But
So they say, I think that initially, if you enroll, it's $50 they give you, and then every event that they simulate, that's $15.
do they just cut back your charging at some point in the night, or what?
The idea is they want to control when your car charges, but it's mostly about if there's a peak coming along, they want to stop any charging that's happening so that the grid doesn't get overstressed. Okay, so that's what they're doing right now. Their intent eventually is to go much further. So when we will have vehicle to grid available, they'll want to use something like this to do that. And also if we could control thermostats and other things, there's other things like hot water heaters that you could actually move when you're using them during the day. Because, you know, if you think about it, if you're taking a shower in the morning, you don't need hot water right away, right? So why heat the water right there and contribute to the morning peak, right? So bottom line is they want to be able to control things that are movable to be able to smoothen out the load on the grid. Okay, cool. So Mike, you're next.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about forbidden fruit, which are cars that we're not allowed to have because Canada, or as I sometimes call it, Canada. Yeah, and they're mostly for North America. So I'll start. It's ranked in price, highest to lowest. So we all know the VW ID3. We've been bugging Volkswagen since it came out to bring it to Canada because it's a great little hatchback. It's available in Europe. It has two sizes of battery, whatever. It's a huge battery for a little car.
66K? That sounds like a lot.
Is that the
Yeah, no, that's Canadian dollars. I've converted it from euros.
Is that
So in all cases, it's Canadian dollars.
That's the lowest price you can get it at?
Yeah.
That seems really high.
Yeah, that's probably why it's not selling very well in Europe right now.
Yeah, but look at the battery size.
Yeah, it's 77 kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the base price would be 58. It would be the smaller ones at the base price.
Yeah, so it's not selling well in Europe, and that might be why. So Volkswagen, yeah, they have some work to do there.
Yeah, but the prices don't translate to.
Yeah, these are euros. I don't know.
Also 77 kilowatts for 558 WLTP. That's pretty trash.
That is pretty trash.
Not gonna lie.
Yeah, yeah, because the Ioniq basically gets that, and it's real. It's actual range, not WLTP made up numbers.
It's a much bigger car.
Yeah. So anyway,
We sell at that price in Canada? Like, that just seems like way overpriced for
Will
what
not
it
be
is.
sell in Canada at all.
These don't sell in None of these cars are
No.
available in Canada.
It's a
All
one-way
right, but if it was available, I mean, my Bolt
that
has a
price, it would not
65
sell.
kilowatt battery.
Yeah, no, it would not sell. It would need to be somewhere down in like $50,000 for it to sell properly, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, it has to compete with a Golf, right? And Golf is not a $65,000 car. All right, so the JMC biggest EV, it's a mid-sized pickup truck. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't name it.
Truckers.
Yeah. 60 kilowatt hour battery, so not a huge battery. Well, I mean, it's a big battery, but it's not big for a pickup. 330 kilometer CLTC, which is a Chinese range standard,
Seems crazy optimistic.
which is crazy optimistic, so probably less than that. It does sell in Australia and Latin America. It's a cool little pickup truck. And JMC apparently is a big, well-known Chinese company for vehicles. These are selling well in Australia. We've got the Neo ET5T, which is a station wagon. 56,000 to 67 Canadian. Big ass battery on the $67,000 one.
Yeah, look at the range hill.
Range, well, that's CLTC. CLTC range, but still, that's well over 5. That's more than you need, even with the optimistic CLTC.
That's like Silverado range.
Yeah.
That has a battery.
That's not real numbers though, so it's probably like closer to 700 in real world.
Yeah,
That's great.
That's fantastic.
Available in China and Europe, so it's crash tested to European standards. Why we can't have this here? Protectionism.
Also, it would cost twice that because of tariffs.
And well, the tariffs are the protectionism,
So-
so it'd be terrible.
The slide about the terrace at the end of your presentation.
Oh, you added the slide, so I'll,
Matt Eglin has got an MG.
An
I'm not
MG4?
sure it's a Ford, and he just loves it.
yeah, MGs are great. Sold in Europe and Australia. Australia gets all the cars we don't. And they don't even have like a clean grid. It's ridiculous. 64 kilowatt hour battery, so not too bad. 519 WLTP, so take that for what it's worth. Nice looking car, little hatchback, 48 grand Canadian, not bad. And that's from British pounds, and our dollar sucks against the pounds. So. There you go.
Is it a Chinese company
Yes.
or a UK?
So, and it's a UK company that was bought by the Chinese and is made in China. So like all MG stuff is made in China.
Is it Geely? Is it Geely?
Geely?
Geely that has?
No? Oh, maybe.
It's one of the big.
It's one of the big Chinese companies that bought them. All right, Hyundai Inster. This is a cool little hatchback that Hyundai's not going to bring here because reasons. Because Americans don't buy little hatchbacks, apparently. Small little battery, 49 kilowatt hours, but not bad. 355 kilometer range, 120 kilowatts fast charge speed, which is decent. So that kicks the pants off of Kona. Again, available everywhere but here, right? Always. Cool little hatchback, very affordable. The Geely Radar RD6, which is a crazy name for this. And it's like on the front, it says radar in like huge letters. It's hilarious. But 34 to 51,000, mid-size pickup. It's got 3 flavors of battery with the top of the range being 100 kilowatt hours, which is huge. 120 kilowatt speed, Australia, China, right? Aussies are getting all the utes. They call these utes. So that would be neat to have here. I think that would sell pretty well here in Canada.
I would buy that just for the battery. Good for
Yeah, it's got V2L and everything as well. Yeah, it has all that. So it's a really capable, cool. It's a unibody, right? So it doesn't like the trucks. The what do they call them? Petrosexuals won't like them because it's a unibody instead of a frame. But whatever, who cares? Dacia Spring. This is a Renault company from Romania. It's Dacia, not Dacia or Dacia, whatever people say. It's Dacia because I lived in Romania for 4 years, so I know how to say it.
It's what? How do you pronounce it?
Dacia. Dacia.
Dacia?
Dacia. It means like
Gotcha.
Gotcha. 26 to 30. It's the cheapest car available in Europe right now. That's an EV. Small little battery, decent range. It's a good second car. Slow charging, right? 30 kilowatts. So it makes the Leaf look good. But it uses CCS,
And the Leaf.
which the Leaf can't do. So, and the Leaf is more expensive than this. So this, yeah,
Even in Europe?
even in Europe.
In Europe, they have to have CCS on the cars.
So they might not sell Leafs in Europe. I don't
I'm
know.
not selling it. That's funny.
But well, it's probably for the best. But this is like cheap and cheerful. I mean, it's like when you look in the inside, like it looks nice, but it's a lot of hard plastic because it's cheap, but whatever.
Yeah, it's perfect for grandma to go get her groceries and stuff
Yeah, yeah.
like that. Doesn't need big charging.
No, exactly.
Plugged in.
Of a student that just needs something.
Dude, yeah.
Yeah, it's a cheap car, 26K.
What about speed for that? I mean, that looks like you definitely don't want to put that on the Autobahn.
Oh, no, you can go on highways. It's normal speed. I left out any car that couldn't do more than 120. There was like a pickup truck that couldn't do 120. I'm like, no. Okay. So yeah, no, this is a legit car. The European, it's a small European hatchback. And there's a Chinese copy of it that's actually like a partnership company, so it's not really a copy. It's like a rebadge. It's the exact same vehicle sold in China under a Chinese local producer. But yeah. The EZS 23,000 subcompact crossover, big battery for 23K. 440 WLTP, so not bad. Sold in India, China, Europe, Australia, probably other places. MG's big over there. So this would be a great car, right? This actually makes the Dacia look like crap. But there you go. And then we're getting towards the end. BYD Seagull. So that is Canadian dollars, $14,800.
These aren't affordable, Mike.
Yeah, it's 8,000 US. Like it's,
And they saw it in your.
Double the price.
and they sell it in, it's sold in Europe, China, and Australia. 30 or 38 kilowatt hour battery, and it goes 400 WLTP. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But I mean, cheap ass car, right?
That's cheaper than a golf cart at my campground.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is why I did a forbidden fruit presentation. Right? Because like people don't know that these things exist in the world. And this is not just like a piece of Chinese junk that's going to kill you in a crash, right? Because this is certified to go in Europe and Australia. So it has to pass actual crash test standards as well, right? So these aren't just like fly by night sketchy companies. Warren Buffett owns shares in BYD, right?
Yeah,
And so does Raymond apparently. So this is, I think, the cheapest one on the list because it's hard to get cheaper than that. And yeah, so Raymond, probably being a liberal person here, would like to talk about this.
No, it has nothing to do with.
I am anti-protectionism, but that's just me. I like free trade.
So you're probably all aware that the US some wonky thing where different manufacturers will have different tariffs. And they're trying to work that out, and the Europeans are scared of retaliation against BMW and Volkswagen and other European brands, right? So Mercedes, so that's why they're being a bit more careful, but the Canadian government is looking at doing something. I'm concerned they'll do the same thing as the US. Now, I started writing a response on what they have in here. They have an email address, you can send whatever you want to. So I started writing a response, and one of the things that I highlighted is that we don't have inexpensive cars here. And I think we should have a moratorium on crash testing and all that in Canada if the car follows a European standard. So the Dacia Spring River would be sellable here because it meets the European standards.
And the ID3 as well.
Yeah, D3 also with that, yeah, so they would probably actually sell it because then they wouldn't have to spend money to, right? So that's a long shot, but I think that that's something we should be doing, right? I think it's a mistake, sorry,
So how close are the European standards to Canadian?
they're pretty close. There is some.
We're not identical. We're a lot closer to the US than they are, but
We're almost
not-
identical to the US, there's a
Yeah.
few small differences, like.
it's not outside the
Big time
world.
running.
Lights is one of them, yeah, so
Yeah.
there's a few small differences, but almost nothing, so.
Like they're good enough. Like it's the Europeans aren't stupid.
Yeah, I mean, if it's good enough for a European, it should be good enough for us, right? So,
Yeah.
same with Australians, right? So, yeah, exactly. So anyway, so I would encourage you to respond to them. if
I
you
shared it
can.
on the Facebook group.
Yeah, you did, I saw that,
Got
yeah,
some
yeah.
flack for it.
You got some flack?
Yeah, apparently they didn't like my tutorial.
Okay. Anyways. So, talking about the federal government, so like I said in the agenda part, there's a new round of ZEVIP, I think we mentioned it before a bit, but The rules are slightly different from the
ZEVIP
previous.
stands for zero emission.
Zero emission vehicle infrastructure program. I think I have it on this.
Very
You see, I have it right there. So, right there.
Okay.
So,
So VIP is concerning VIPs.
so this is a program, there's different parts of it. So, there's a part that's specific to, MURBs, multi-unit residential buildings, right? And that's the one that we're most concerned about here. It's really the only one applicable to anything that we're doing. There's no subsidies for, single-family homes or things of that nature. So, so they reopened it on July 2nd. The deadline to apply is the 19th of September. This one, there's a minimum of 20 charging stations. Okay, that's a bit of a hurdle. So, it seems that they did that because in the previous round, they had partners that were taking care of the smaller deployments. Hydro Ottawa in particular was distributing money for that. And there's a whole list of partners that were doing that. And for some reason, they decided not to do it with these guys again, is what I'm guessing, but that's just a guess, right? The rest of the stuff looks fairly similar. Up to 50% of, and up to $5,000 per charging station. That's still pretty good. Maximum of $5 million. We haven't seen one that big yet, but who knows? We saw one 1.4, right? So.
I saw some in the state, in Montreal, but not around here.
Yeah, but it doesn't take that long if you have 300 parking spots that it becomes hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, right? So anyway, so the MURB also, it has to have a common entrance and have a minimum of 3 stories or footprint. Okay, so this would exclude most row housing, okay, because most row housing does not have a common entrance, right? Yes.
So this is to incentivize installation of basically level 2 chargers for like condo buildings,
Yes,
things like that. This isn't a level 3 thing. This is.
There is another part of the program that's also reopened, that's for level 3, but that's for public, these are not public, right?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so, so that's part of it. The other part is, I think this was seen before, you have 30 months install. Once you've got the approval, you've got 30 months to get it done. It has to be permanent, you can't use a plug, it has to be hardwired.
Used to be able to have a plug.
The previous one you could?
There was no.
No specification, okay.
So what happened is basically those chargers would disappear and that happened on Marketplace out of nowhere.
Yeah, so, I think that's generally a good thing. I think it's better actually to hardwire them than to have people screw up plugs, right? Exactly, right? And it applies to new or expansion. Okay, so if you already have some, you could use this to add more, okay, which is interesting. They actually specifically said before, I don't think they excluded it specifically, but they didn't include it specifically either, right? They have to be networked, okay? Why do they have to be networked? My guess, I'm pretty sure though, it's because they want them to be manageable, right? Because part of the point here is to make sure that you're managing them when you have enough stations that it becomes a problem, right?
Do you run your own server? Or does it have to be networked to like Flo's network?
No,
It's,
as long as they can talk to each other, that they're networkable, like that you can create your own network for charging. Basically.
OCP, is it?
so that's a different story. There's a standard to talk, a protocol to talk to these, OCPP, or whatever. They don't mention anything about that. What they want is something that actually will have the capability of talking to something else, right? To be controllable. That's the impression I get anyways. In terms of plugs, they accept pretty well everything, including J3400, right, for NACS, and that's AC and DC charging included. Okay, so
That's the Tesla plug for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
J400.
Yeah.
Just want to maybe point out, like, residential installation might cost you $2 to $3 grand with the charger. On a MURBs, it would be about $4 to $5 grand without the charger type of deal. So there's a big price difference if you're in a condo trying to install a charger versus residential at home, or, row housing that's successful of some kind.
So the problem is you have to deploy lots more infrastructure, panels, and transformers, you have to core between floors of garages, you have to do all sorts of other.
That's a reason why there's more incentives to help them get chargers, so that it's a more level,
Yeah.
Sorry?
More equitable.
Yeah.
Because we've done a lot of, actually, I have a spreadsheet, which I'm not gonna talk about, I'm not gonna show today, but, and actually, I showed it to the city today, to try to see what they thought about it. But anyways, everybody that we talked to, they asked us, well, how much should we charge and this kind of stuff, right? So I did a spreadsheet to help people develop scenarios to understand how much they should charge people, because the problem is when you have, in many cases, when you're talking about a panel, talking about a transformer, you're talking about switches and breakers, you're talking about $10,000 of hardware plus $10,000 of labor to install it, to get the first charging station installed, right? So, and so it rapidly becomes a problem that you have to invest a lot of capital for very few stations at the beginning, right? So, the spreadsheet is to help them understand how much they should charge back for the stations and all that. Anyways, but we're working with a few properties right now. There's one in particular in Orleans that they're actually going to be bidding on this to get it. So we're hoping others will do the same thing. But 20 is a pretty high hurdle to cross.
Allison has his hand.
Sure, Alan?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about how they will do billing. Like, is there anything in the standard or in the program about billing the individual customers for their electricity used? Because that seems like one of the sticky points of these things is to make sure people are charged fairly.
Yeah, so I didn't see anything. However, the fact that they're they're networkable means that everything that we've seen, I believe that you could actually talk to has a capability of measuring how much current is used, right?
Not every one of them,
Everyone?
but a good portion of them. The majority the companies actually offer billing services with the chargers themselves. So
Yeah, but for that they need to be network and all that, right? So
correct, which is one of the criteria.
yeah.
Well, as soon as you're working with a third party doing the billing, all of a sudden there's an extra overhead that's been added to all the pricing, right? So
Absolutely. Now there are, without getting into details, there's extremes. Some are relatively inexpensive, like
Some are fairly easy to just add a fixed rate to your condo fees, and then you just charge however, doesn't matter because it'll come into it. Others, they decide to have the billing. You could get your own billing, but now you need someone to manage it and send the billing, and then there's pros and cons. So there's many ways we can talk about it for probably a good half hour if you want.
yeah. Let's talk that. But
at a time.
it's something that comes up very, very often when we talk to condos, because a lot of people are concerned that, well, I don't have an EV, why should I pay for the electricity of this guy that's got an EV, right?
So we live in a society.
So the stipulations, whatever, for the program, it's just to get money to get it installed, right? It doesn't really care about the operation of it. It's just a way to get funding.
Yes.
So how you want to manage it is kind of up to you.
So I didn't see anything about managing it, but the fact that you actually could talk to it is a big component.
No, but my point is that like they're just trying to fund projects to install chargers.
Yeah, just trying to get them back to going,
I think the networkability is probably also because they're going with the V2G and the challenges and all that. So they're being proactive for that.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, because really any MERV of any size, they need to do something anyway.
And they can use the battery bank that they're gonna have in that parking lot. Crazy.
So anyways, it's definitely a concern that we get from every property we've talked to. So is there any other questions on that?
No.
No? Okay. So let's go through this. I'll try to do it fast, which I'm not really good at, but anyways, so here I want to talk about the energy transition. And of course, it includes e-mobility, right? And can it happen fast enough? So much of this comes from the presentation I did at EV Society a few months ago. So if you've seen that, maybe this will be some repeat, but I've added a few little other things in there. But anyway, so bottom line is, I want to talk about what's the problem? What's the problem we're facing, right? And then I want to talk about disinformation, misinformation, which I'm sure we've talked about before, right? But I want to give some specific examples just to make sure that you've got a good sense of my thinking anyways. Then we'll talk about, do we have enough materials? This is a big thing that we hear all the time. There's not enough copper to do the transit. There's not enough lithium. There's not enough this, right? We'll talk about that, real numbers on that. Then we'll talk about technology adoptions relatively briefly, and we'll talk about the current market, but we'll also conclude with, what is my thinking anyways on how fast things are going to move, okay? Why is this important? Well, this is another graph I just found today actually that shows the average temperature over the years, right? And you can see the orange line here. That's last year, and the red line is this year. So the El Nino is actually adding to the temperature, and the influence should start diminishing about now. So the temperature is going to come down a bit, but if you could see that we're way out of everything we've seen in the last. This is since 1940, I believe. No, 1981 in this case. Somewhere around there. Anyway, so it's not. No, sorry. 1940. So it's from 1940. Okay, so you see that the temperatures are much higher. We need to do something about that, right? And of course, as we've discussed before, the biggest culprit is greenhouse gases from the combustion of fossil fuels, right?
The hottest day ever recorded was last Monday. The hottest day before that was the Sunday before that.
Yeah. So it's clear I believe the science to start off with, but we were seeing it in the data very clearly that there's an issue, right? So what's the problem and what are the options? Okay, so this is from my perspective here. So the planet, okay, it cannot support 8 billion people without technology, okay? What I mean by that is if you look at what the Green Revolution in particular and how that happened, it happened through the production of fertilizers, pesticides, and using tractors and other modern farming techniques to increase the yields. Okay, we cannot do that without technology, and a tractor is technology. Right now, they're using mostly fossil fuels, right? So we're very dependent on fossil fuels to be able to feed everybody on the planet. Okay, make sense? Okay, so I've talked to a lot of people about this. At KCOR, I have some friends who are actually climate scientists, and I say here, the planet cannot support more than 1 billion people if we don't have technology. The real number is probably around 300 to 500 million, okay? So if we went back to the 1800s and didn't use all this fossil fuel stuff, and went back to the way we did things before, we probably cannot support more than about 300 to 500 million people, okay? The Green Revolution has really made a huge difference. So what do we do? Well, some people talk about degrowth, okay? Well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to convince people that they should get what we have, right? And really, it's about reducing the consumption of energy that we do mostly through fossil fuels. That's really what the underlying problem is, right? So degrowth may be a solution to this, but I don't think it's a practical solution because you've got these other 7 million people who did not, for the most part, contribute to this climate change thing. And what are you going to do with them? Are you going to let them starve? Right? It's not a practical thing to do, right? And they want to reach parity with us, right? They want to get what we have, so they want to increase their standard of living. So what are they doing? They're putting more pressure on the planet, right? But we need to figure a way to accommodate that, right, within the planetary boundaries. So we need to figure out how to support actually 10 billion people. Why 10 billion? Because the forecast is that the population of the world will peak around 10 billion in 2050 or so, okay? And we need to do that without cooking the planet, so we have to stop burning fossil fuels, right? So that's the background. That's what started me going on this path, right? So anyways, so if we talk about this and misinformation, I think I've shown some of this to you guys before, right? So this bus here, Hamilton, Ontario, okay, carbon negative.
Carbon negative.
It's impossible.
And it burns stuff too.
That's impossible, right? It's impossible. So this is disinformation, right? This is actually wrong. It's false, right? They're lying to us, right?
Is that a natural gas bus?
Yes.
I'd be curious to know if that bus is still colored like that now that they passed the disinformation law.
That's a good question. I thought about that too, but I haven't looked into it. Anyways,
What was the basis of that claim?
Creative accounting,
Creative accounting, yes.
it's,
Yes.
Any colorful letters?
no, what they did is they counted not only the emissions from this bus, but what they did is they counted the emissions from the diesel bus that didn't exist as negative on the
Really?
balance sheet.
Yeah.
So that it would be a carbon negative bus because this emitted less than the diesel bus, and the diesel bus was, it was creative accounting. It was like, wow, you guys should be bookies for the mob or Donald Trump.
And the other big thing they did is they assumed renewable natural gas. So renewable natural gas is, if you guys know about
A dump.
Food.
from food or from ROPEC here, you know, ROPEC where they do the water treatment,
Yeah.
thing in the East End. There's actually a big flame often where they flare off the methane that they're not using, right? But that could be used to power buses, right? So that's the assumptions they're making, but in
But
reality,
there's not enough
It's crap.
renewable.
well, there's not enough to go around for one thing, but it's crap. They're still emitting stuff, right? And,
Right.
so they can't be negative. They could be net zero maybe, if it's all renewables.
So the thing with
right?
methane is it's about 80 times, 30 or 80 times worse than CO2.
Over 20 years. Over 20 years, it's 80. Over 100 years, it's 30.
Yeah, compared to CO2. And there's gonna be leaks, and any kind of leak immediately just undoes
Yeah,
undoes
well,
everything.
also, if you burn the methane in a bus engine, it's gonna be about 30% efficient. If you captured it at the source and then had a little power plant next to the dump or wherever
So
you're,
that,
that would be about 70%
more.
efficient.
plus you are producing nitrous oxides and all that in the engine.
Anyway, it's bullshit.
Yes, it's essentially.
But if you look at the fossil fuel industry right now, the smart people and you know, whatever you think of it, fossil fuel people, there's some people there that are smart. They're maybe nefarious, but they're smart, and they see the writing on the wall. They see that we need to move away from fossil fuels, and they see that we have technologies that are better, cheaper to do that, right? So it's a
Back to conservative.
so it is an existential crisis, right? A crisis. So they're doing everything they can. And actually, I've got a book here, Merchants of Doubt. I can show it to you if you want to after. That was written about 15 years ago. They explain how there's some the best PR firms in the world. They're the same people who told us that cigarette smoking wasn't bad, and acid rain wasn't anything to worry about, and also ozone wasn't a thing. They are the same people using the exact same techniques to try to convince us that fossil fuel burning is not a big deal. Okay. So anyways, you know, this one of my favorite sayings, right? Don't ask a barber if you need a haircut. Well, you should never assume that the fossil fuel industry or anybody else for that matter is telling you the truth, right? Everybody has an agenda, okay? I'm independent from commercial interests when I do things like that, right? But I still have an agenda though. My agenda is to reduce greenhouse gases as much as possible, right? That will influence how I position stuff, and that will influence what I present to people, right? So everybody has an agenda, and you have to know what the agenda is, right? I used to run into this all the time when I used to work in IT, where some vendors who are big proposals that were clearly in their interest and not in the interest of the end customer, right? Anyway, so you should never assume you're being told the truth. And one thing in particular is when you're being told that we will always need fossil fuels. Every time I see something like this, especially if it says a word like always, never, can't be done, you should always think, well, why? Is that really true? Okay, and that actually is not true. Okay, we won't. And I won't.
How do we know you're not lying to us?
Trust me. But I could explain that if you want to, but it's not not the gist of this. So the volume of disinformation and misinformation has increased dramatically over the last few years. And there's a group in the UK, Stop Burning Stuff, that they're reacting to that and they're trying to combat that. But anyways,
Paying for all of that.
The fossil fuel.
fossil industry.
So it's purely comes from.
It costs them, it's like 1%, or not even, it's less than 1% of their earnings
Especially
to
marketing.
expand their business, right? Like, they know what's coming, and so for them to spend a few $100 million on an ad campaign that lets them continue drilling and burning
Yeah.
is nothing to them. It's advertising budget.
So last year, in part because of the war in Ukraine, the oil industry globally made about $200 billion in profits, not in revenue, in profits, okay?
Yeah.
they're using some of that money to try to influence people, okay?
You read the article from the Suncor guy in the Globe this weekend?
I didn't read that in the week.
Zero apologies.
Yeah.
Right?
I will go there because I know someone who works for Suncor, but anyways. So the way they do it is they start with a grain of truth, okay? And this is always the case from everything I've seen. There's always a grain of truth in there, okay? And what they do is they distort it and exaggerate it in the context of EVs, okay? Good example of that is cobalt and child labor in the Democratic Republic of Congo, right? So you've all heard this, that this is a huge problem. We should be really concerned about that, right? Well, Amnesty International wrote a report a number of years ago, and they found child labor, okay? I'm not in favor of child labor, okay? What I'll tell you though, is I know some people who take their kids out of school in the fall to pick up to harvest the harvest, okay? Is that child labor or not? What I'm more concerned about is conditions they're working under, right? And the damage it might make to their health and the fact that they're working and not going to school, those type of things to me are more significant. But the point is, yes, there is likely some people, some kids mining cobalt, okay? It's a small percentage of it, right? So what the narrative is EV batteries use cobalt, okay? So 40% of the world's production of cobalt is used in EV batteries as of 2022. Yeah. Sorry, EV batteries.
So batteries in total is how much?
It's on the next slide. 30% for the other ones, okay? So no reverse like child labor, right? Especially under bad conditions, right? Which are bad for their health and their own future, right? So you shouldn't buy an EV because this is bad for children, right?
Sure, so.
That's
That's
what
what
you're-
you also have to stop buying petrol.
Okay, so you're getting ahead of things.
Spoiler.
So you only hear of it in the context of EVs, okay? But if you look at the broader, and by the way, we keep buying stuff made in small shops, clothing and other things, right? So, and we don't,
But wait a minute, don't we all have iPads and laptops that have cobalt in them?
Oh,
So that's coming up, so that's coming up, so here, if you look at the broader context, what they don't tell you, okay, and this is the same thing with every one of these cases. Smartphones, laptops, and other devices like that, they have cobalt batteries. And actually, they will have cobalt batteries for a long time because they have the highest density of energy. And there's really nothing that I'm aware of that would replace the energy density of these batteries in the short-term future anyways. Sorry?
No.
So about 30% of world production goes into these batteries, okay? Fairly large amount. But they don't tell you the oil industry uses cobalt to remove sulfur from crude oil, right? They don't tell you that. They do it, but they don't tell you about that, right? LFP batteries, they don't have cobalt. So my newer Tesla LFP batteries, 0 cobalt in the car, right? So that's a broader context, right? So if child labor is truly a concern of yours, right? If you're really concerned about it, the conclusion based on the broader context should be that you shouldn't buy portable electronics, right? You shouldn't buy gas. So you shouldn't buy a gas car. You should in fact buy an EV with LFP batteries, right? So my point is they're distorting the truth to the end, and actually we could play the same game to some degree, but it's not particularly productive, right? So the context is distorted, and there's really no reason to avoid buying an EV because of cobalt, right? If you're concerned about child labor, become an activist to try to combat that, right?
That is all the cobalt from that country?
About 60% from the Congo, and about 10% of that is illegal mines that would potentially have child labor. So about 6% of world production potentially has child labor involved in producing it, right? Most of the mining is done by the large, the Glencores and all that, the large mining companies that use, multi-100-ton trucks, right? They're not using kids to drive these things, right? That's for sure. Okay, they wouldn't be able to reach the pedals, but anyways.
If I get 2 kids, one for the pedal.
Get the wooden blocks.
Yeah, 2 kids in a truck.
Okay.
Back to horses? No.
So anyways, you've heard often we don't have enough materials and enough minerals. There's a lot of confusion here because There's elements, there's compounds, there's minerals, right? There's materials, they all have slightly different meanings. But anyways, I'll sort of abscond of that for a second and not worry about that. But here, if you look at this image here, you see the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest building in the world, right? You've seen pictures of it probably. This is to scale how much coal we use every year, not 100 years, every single year. Same with this is a liquid equivalent of natural gas and crude oil. Okay? The amounts are absolutely enormous, right? Okay, very, very large amounts. One thing to note here, actually it's right there. You'll hear very often that fossil fuels provide 80% of the world's primary energy demands, okay? Talk about that on the next slide. So it's about 21 billion tons of fossil fuels every year that are extracted and burned every single year. Okay, they're non-renewable, right? And they're very inefficient, and we'll talk about that more in the next slide. Do we need to replace this? So what the fossil fuel industry is saying, and others that want to drag that want to slow down the progression, they're saying that we have to replace all of this with some green equivalent. Okay. Well, in fact, if you look at this is anyways, there's a name for this type of diagram. On the left, those are the sources of energy. You can hear this is a year that's about 100 quads, so that makes it easier to calculate stuff. US consumption in 2021. It's a good example, representative of the world, right? So if you look at the sources of energy, about 20% are clean sources, okay? They're not fossil fuels, okay? About 20%. Okay? You look in the middle here, in pink, that shows you the context in which things are used, okay? So residential, commercial, industrial, or transportation, okay? Now the point on the right-hand side is that from all this energy use, you get energy services. So you move your car to where you want to go. You heat your house, you heat your water, you do some chemical processing or whatever. That's energy, that's useful work done from the energy, right? This mix here, about 2/3 of it is rejected energy. Okay? Rejected energy, mostly waste heat. Okay. If you take the example of transportation here, about 27% of the energy goes to transportation, and only about 6% results in useful work. Okay. So if you look at this in the context of an EV, you get about 4 times the amount of work in an EV, 4 times the efficiency anyways, right? So here, if you take 5 units of energy and you run it through the transportation engine thing, you have 4 of them that show up at the rejected energy, 1 at energy services, okay? If you do that with an EV, 5 units going in, you get 4 that give you energy services, and only 1 is rejected energy, okay? If you look at the case of a heat pump, well, conventional heating with natural gas, the maximum you could ever get is 100% efficiency, right? You get 90-some%, whatever, but you cannot get more than 100%. Now, with a heat pump, you could get 3, 4, 500% efficiency, right? So again, here you have 1 unit going in, but you've got 3, 4, 5 units, exactly, right? So the point here is, if we have to replace all this wasteful stuff, yeah, we have a significantly bigger problem. But in reality, the problem is not that big. If you look at what's clean sources here, it's about 20, okay, about 20%. And energy services is 32 there, okay, roughly 32. So in other words, we need to increase the amount of energy that we produce for energy services by a certain percentage, which is probably a very small percentage. Anyways, didn't do all the math, but my guess is we need less than 40% of this whole thing that would be actual energy that we need, right? So here, what we're doing is we're cutting out these things and adding smaller components. So if you talk to the fossil fuel industry, they'll tell you, well, solar is only 1.5 and wind is only 3.3. If we want to get to 100%, we have to grow it by 20 times, right? Well, no, we have to grow it, but by 3 to 5 times, a lot more attainable, okay? So the problem's not as big as people think it is. Now, the other thing is metals, okay? So there's a lot of talk about metals and what we need to produce all this clean tech, right? So transmission lines, windmills, solar panels, EVs, all this stuff takes materials, right? You look at the world and how much materials are mined, and this is 2019, 3 billion tons is iron, right? Everything else is like 3%, okay, or 6% actually. Everything else is 6%. Lithium is down here, 97, so about 100,000 tons per year, okay? 3 billion, okay? This is not very big, okay? And the other things we need for the green transition is aluminum, copper, manganese, nickel, and a few other things in here in the rare earth elements, which I'll talk about a bit later, okay? But if you look at it, you can see that the quantities aren't that big. So when people say, you know, we're going to have 10 times more mines if we do this green transition, well, it's false. We're going to need actually less mining, okay? This here, without getting into too much detail, you could look at it after if you wish. It's got a list of different things we need for the green transition and how much of those we have known reserves of and things of that nature. The only one that's a problem here is tellurium. We have less than what is expected that we need, okay? Now, we'll see later why that's not necessarily that important, but if you look at the quantities here, the IEA, the International Energy Agency, they predict that we will need 28 to 40 million tons of minerals total, cumulative, to do the transition, okay? What do they include in there? They include nickel, cobalt, and a few other things like that, okay? Lithium and a few other things of that nature. But that's what they're saying we need total. Remember, 21 billion tons a year of fossil fuels, okay? This is nothing compared to the fossil fuels we burn every single year, okay? So it's about 500 times more actually for fossil fuels. So we don't have enough rare earth. This is one that comes up again, and I know we discussed this before, but anyways, rare earths are really in the context of EVs, and also windmills is no different really. They're used to make permanent magnets for electric motors, okay? And that is true. EV, grain of truth again, right? So EV motors, currently they use permanent magnets, which use rare earths, right? Well, it turns out that conventional vehicles have lots of electric motors too. Okay, I don't remember the exact number that I counted, but it's probably about a dozen total if you look at absolutely everything. So there are motors already in those vehicles that have the same problem. So why is it a problem for EVs and not a problem for conventional cars, right? It's nonsense, right? Let's talk about catalytic converters. So why are catalytic converters being sold off of conventional cars? Because they have valuable elements in them, platinum, palladium, and rhodium. Valuable because they're scarce and all that, and not everybody on the planet uses catalytic converters. There's plenty of places where the regulations don't require that, right? So again, on rare earths, lithium, by the way, is not a rare earth. We often make that mistake. I've made it myself. And actually, the funny one that I see, it's funny but not so funny, is people confuse lithium with cobalt and think there's an issue with child labor related to lithium. Okay, I've heard it several times, but I think it's the telephone game where people, you know, tell the story one to another and then it changes over time, right? So, I've never heard of anything anywhere with lithium and child labor. Never ever heard that. So rare earths are expensive. Okay, those are examples of rare earths. But there's different types of electric motors. There's induction motors, and there's permanent magnet motors, right? So your Model 3 dual motor has, I believe, it's an induction in front,
Yeah, permanent magnet in the back.
permanent magnet in the back, right?
There's also reluctance motors.
Yeah, But the point is, we can make electric motors today without permanent magnets. There's an efficiency issue there, but we could do that, right? Now, Tesla and others, they're actually developing permanent magnets that don't have rare earths, okay? So we don't need rare earths to make permanent magnets for electric motors for EVs, okay? So when people tell you we don't have enough rare earths, well, we don't need them, okay? We just do not need them. We use them for a reason. It's all about cost and efficiency and all that. And if they're cheap enough, they will keep on using them because there's some benefit, right? So we don't need the rare earths for EV motors, right? And they're, like I said, they're expensive. So if they become more expensive, they're going to find alternatives and use either induction or magnets that don't have rare earths, right? So a bit more on that. Other example, batteries, and I know we've talked about this before, but nickel and cobalt is pretty expensive, right? So the original batteries, certainly the batteries that I have in my 2021 Model Y, they contain it's an NMC chemistry, right? So they have nickel, manganese, and cobalt, and nickel and cobalt are expensive. Cobalt has got this issue with child labor, right? So what do? Well, actually, it's more because of the cost than anything else. We're going to lithium iron phosphate batteries, right? My newer EV, lithium iron phosphate batteries, no cobalt, no nickel, cheaper battery, right? And lithium is also expensive. So what are they doing? Well, sodium ion. We discussed it before. There are some cars in China today that are on the roads of using sodium ion batteries. Okay, and that's going to become more and more common as they develop the technology, as they get economies of scale and all that, right? One other additional benefit of sodium is that in lithium ion batteries, you cannot use aluminum as a separator. Won't go into details. It has to do with the electrochemistry. The aluminum gets eaten up, okay? So they use copper instead, right? So when you hear people talking about, well, there's 200 pounds or 200 kilos of copper in EV, part of it is this separator that's used in the battery, right? But we don't need it. If we're using sodium ion, we can actually use aluminum instead. Aluminum is much more abundant than copper, much cheaper than copper, right?
And lighter.
Lighter, yes.
Big time.
Yes, so it's lighter. So there's, my point here is there's ways to work around any constraint we have, right? So any material constraint, there's no issues. Now, there is plenty of lithium, by the way. So if you look at the real number, we have enough lithium to build billions of cars, right? But sodium will always be cheaper. And right now, it's better for the environment to process sodium than lithium. But anyway, bottom line is we're likely to see a lot of sodium batteries in the future, right? And that's one of the ways of getting away from these constraints.
The sodium batteries are less energy dense. Is that why we're not using them now?
Well, currently, they are. Theoretically, they should be able to make them more energy dense. Okay, they're working on that. They're not there, but I've seen some data that's showing that some sodium ion batteries are just about the same density as lithium as LFP, which is getting pretty close to. And if you look at some of the applications, so static storage in particular, doesn't matter how much it weighs, right? What matters is the cost and other factors, right?
So do you think they'll actually phase out lithium batteries?
No, not necessarily. It depends on how well the other batteries perform. If they perform better and they're cheaper and they last longer, they will get phased out, right? So if you look at LFP, the only disadvantage of LFP is the energy density, right? But the energy density is going up as they're finding better ways of making the batteries.
So cold charging performance. Another disadvantage.
So there's other things, yeah.
But there's always going to be multiple different options on the market, right? It's not like every car has a 4-cylinder engine. There's going to be options.
There's gas and diesel, right?
Yeah, so
Cold charging is worse than sodium?
Not necessarily, but LFP batteries can't be charged below 0 degrees Celsius. But they can just be warmed up.
these are solvable problems, but there are constraints that are important, right? But that being said, my newest EV has LFP batteries, and I just went through a winter with it, and it wasn't a problem, right? Solvable problems, right?
Raymond? Raymond,
yeah.
can I take you back, if we're having a quick questions and answer thing, from the last point, do you have any idea what percentage of our heating is actually done in like really cold sort of environments? Like one of the things I brought up your thing there about, you know, the fact that most of our heating and all of this can be done and we do better. And of course, the person, the oil head, I guess I'll call him, who was at me said, well, what do we do in Canada when it's minus 30 out, you know, and like that, then we do need a massive amount of electricity to heat. And we have a lot of parts of Canada where, you know, like the north, where it's often very cold.
Well,
but
so,
like 20,000 people live up north. So what percentage of Canadian of the heating of Canada, Russia, Europe, United States is actually done in sort of minus 20 degree weather type thing?
I don't have that number. What I could tell you for Ottawa, So my heat pump works to minus 27 Celsius. And there's been only one incident since one day, February last year, where it went to minus 32 actually. And that's extremely unusual for Ottawa. When people talk about temperature, they're usually talking about temperature with the wind chill included, which is totally irrelevant for the heat pump. Actually, the heat pump should perform better if the wind chill is higher because there's more air going through the heat pump. So, but there is an issue where if it gets cold enough, the heat pumps get less efficient.
Air source heat pumps.
Air source heat pumps, yes. Now, the ground source, they need to produce more heat, but the efficiency stays the same, so they're much better. Now, the air source heat pumps, they get closer to 1 as you get to temperatures like minus 27. So there is a point that we need electricity to deal with those situations, right? But again, it's very, very infrequent and you know, I don't know the exact numbers, but if you think about the US, which essentially, you know, they all have weather that's better than here for the most part. So, well, Alaska's pretty small, about 4 million people, I believe. That's pretty small,
The
right?
Scandinavian countries have mostly heat pumps now.
Yeah.
And they're the coldest.
And actually, Alaska, in a place like Juneau, they're probably relatively warm because they're close to the sea, right?
Yeah.
So.
So you can heat pretty much anything with heat pump nowadays,
Yeah.
because we have modern technology in
Yeah,
the
actually-
21st century.
For industrial purposes,
Welcome to the future.
heat pumps actually work to get heat up to about 200 degrees Celsius. If you're doing some industrial processes and need heat of that temperature, you could use heat pumps and save money, okay? So again, I said 28 to 40 million tons of materials. But these are materials that are recyclable too, right? Against 21 billion tons of fossil fuels that are non-renewable, okay? So what's driving electrification right now? At first, it was a question of, geez, there was a lot of programs to try to promote solar, wind, EVs, even though they cost more to try to get economies of scale and all that, right? We're there now, okay? We're there now. Now it's economics that are driving it. And what's happening is as things are getting cheaper, the transition is accelerating, okay? Because the differential in price between the old stuff, which is still going up in price, and the wind and solar is getting bigger, okay? So, yeah, cool. Is there anything else here? So yeah, so the cost of renewables continues to drop, and we're expecting still significant drops. Projections are showing significant drops on the order of 70 to 80% until about 2035, 2040. So you know, things are just getting better on that side, and fossil fuel stuff continues to increase in price. And I won't get too much into details about the future of that. There's a lot of issues there. But the transition will, and we're seeing it accelerate, right? So this I won't belabor too much, but really, when we're looking at how fast is this going to happen, you have to think like Wayne Gretzky, and it's about figuring out where the puck will be. So where is the market going to be in 10, 20, 50 years, not where it is right now. Yes.
You're talking about Wayne Gretzky, but you got a Tampa Bay Lightning. Just confused.
I never noticed that. Anyways, so where are we today, right? We are in a fossil fuel-based economy. 80% of our primary energy comes from fossil fuels, right? That is the reality of today. We can't change that instantly from you know, just by the click of the fingers, right? Now, the IEA, International Energy Agency, is really good at historical data, but they're terrible at forecasting stuff, and they are the ones that most people listen to when they're looking at forecasts for how fast this stuff is going to happen. Okay, so it's very hard to figure out the future, and I'll try to speed up a bit. So this, we've seen this before. Mike has talked about it numerous times. These are it's the S curve for technology adoption, right? Every technology since very like the Iron Age and all that followed the same S curve. Okay, that's the way technology gets adopted, period. So we don't see why it would be any different with EVs, right? But if you look at the IEA, well, they're doing linear projections. But a better projection on the right-hand side here is the Rocky Mountain Institute has got some forecasts that are more in line with the forecast.
They have a statistician on staff, apparently.
So anyways, this is worldwide market share. Okay, they're saying by 2030 there will be somewhere around 70-some%. Okay, so and actually, I think personally this is a bit understating how fast it's going to happen. Okay,
Is that here or is that just
worldwide?
Global.
Worldwide. Okay. So, did I mention about the barber thing? I think I did,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so this here is the barber telling you not to get a haircut, okay? This is CO of ExxonMobil telling you that in 2040, every new passenger car, he's saying passenger car, he's not talking about other stuff, will be electric by 2040. Okay? He has every reason to tell you.
Well, you can push that date out far enough that it's like, you can still buy a gas car tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 2040 instead of like 2030,
Yeah, but-
35.
The point is, he's actually admitting it, and he's one of the people who would probably not want to admit it, right? And if they know this, they.
No, but don't forget, he's looking for a new job too. He can't look stupid.
Yeah.
So anyways, we think it's gonna happen faster than that. These are the projections that we did, Mike did in 2017, and we're very close. This is uncanny how close we are to the curve.
Math,
Right?
baby.
And
Actually, related, I forgot to put this in the news, or I didn't see the headline while I was preparing the news, but I did see that the number of Transport Canada claims for the federal credit doubled from last year over the same period.
Yeah.
So we're still doing like year over year
Now,
doublings.
doubling, you have to adjust for different pricing and all that kind of stuff, right? But it's an indication there's a lot more being
We're on the
purchased, right?
So
So-
are you guys saying it's not real, that there's a slowdown?
No, there is,
No,
if you look at all the data.
The evidence does not support that.
Because all of the articles.
I know, but they don't look at
Some models of
data.
brands are piling up on
Yeah.
the lot, but they're all the over.
But also that's normal car industry stuff, like
It's a high price. one?
We don't,
No,
no,
it's the ones that are
no.
low.
Can I just point out?
It's misinformation.
misinformation.
Yeah,
The
can I
evidence
just
does not
point out?
support that.
Back in the days, cars were dropped to the lot, you pick what you wanted on it. COVID happened, we had shortage of everything, then the cars were, you had to order it in advance. But now we're back to normal and cars are on lots. So it's normal to see them there.
Yeah.
So people are saying, oh, it's slowing down, look, they have a bunch of EVs everywhere, but no, it's just getting back to reality.
They take a great.
We're canceling
Well,
Oakville.
That's
Well,
politics.
That's a whole,
And-
we'll talk about it later if we have time, but.
Round table, I can tell.
But if you look at this notion that there's a grain of truth, okay?
Yeah.
If you look at car sales, Q4 2023 versus Q1 2024, they're lower in 2024. But that's always the case. The first quarter is the weakest
Yeah,
quarter.
that's just seasonality, that's.
So they take that as a reason to report that, hey, look, EV sales are
Slowing,
dropping.
it's like.
But you can also remember there's a slowdown on
Yeah.
gas.
The percentage of EVs being
Who
sold.
wants that message?
People who want to slow down people want to slow down the transition, other people.
So legacy automakers are the big one, because it's expensive for them to retool their factories to make EVs, because they're used to making engines, and that's completely different. And so it's very expensive. It gives them no quarterly benefit on the shareholder sheets. And so there are huge motions inside legacy auto industry to pump the brakes on EVs. It makes our, Toyota's a classic example, but it makes like everyone's giving Ford a hard time now for losing a crap ton of money, right? They lost $2 billion in the latest quarter, and it's because of EVs, right? It's because it's expensive to put in the capital to build a factory to make EVs, and it doesn't look good for shareholders for like 4 years.
So they've been waiting for the opportunity to switch the message.
Well, so.
Basically, there's always elements, the old guard in any big old auto
Yeah,
company, but is looking for an excuse to just kill this EV thing because it makes my shares go down.
So there's all sorts of issues.
There's a lot of stuff.
One of the issues is that Ford and GM and others want to convince the government to still subsidize EVs.
Yeah.
Right? So if they're convincing the government that sales are going down or slowing or whatever, the governments are gonna.
Yeah, like I said, politics.
They're gonna provide subsidies for battery plants and
Yeah.
conversions to EV plants and all that, right?
And so,
Again, remember, this is the barber telling you about the car that he wants to sell you, so he's gonna fashion the message to meet his objectives, right? So if he could scratch some money from the government or get rid of the sales mandate that we have now in Canada, right, that's a good thing for them, right? So there's all sorts of reasons why they would want to make people think.
Anyways, the data doesn't support a slowdown.
And there is
there's also the very simple fact that media always wants to say whatever gets them the most clicks, and usually negativity drives clicks.
There's that.
And actually, I'm surprised how fast that thing went around.
Well, just considering that it's easily disproven with like a Google
Exactly.
search. but-
Exactly. But anyways, okay, so if you look at overall sales, this is over time here, there's a market share and the actual stock, okay? So what really matters is how many cars on the road are electric and not, right? So we're thinking somewhere around 2037 will be about halfway.
Yeah, I have a projection on that. I'm
So-
sorry to show you.
Yeah, so roughly it's this, okay? So now one thing you need to know is when we are at 50% fleet, that is not 50% of miles driven. Newer cars tend to be driven more than older cars. So when we're at 50% market share or 50% fleet, will probably be about 60% of miles driven and kilometers driven that will be electric, okay? So we'll do the math and show you that. But anyways, bottom line is we're moving very, very rapidly and you know, S curves are the way we adopt technology, right? We could slow it down, speed it up, but ultimately, it's the economics is driving it.
That's your standard distribution.
Yeah. So here, this is again about where the puck will be. So we know that solar and wind will continue getting cheaper batteries. The same thing. I won't go too much on that. So how fast could it happen? Okay. So so you saw some of the stuff about EV market share, right? If you look at Norway and others, it's about, you know, you're going from literally about 0 to 100% in about 10 years. That's the time it takes. That's the time it took for Norway. Norway is a special case in many respects. However, they did much of that when there weren't very many EVs available. And there were, well, there's tax incentives there. So for them, they were a bit cheaper. But anyways, bottom line is if we have the Fords and the GMs of the world actually producing cars, we're going to be able to switch over quite fast, right? China, more than 2% of registrations today are new energy vehicles. So that means hydrogen, which there's not, means PHEV and BEV. Okay, so and the balance is going towards BEV. So PHEVs are
Battery electric.
battery electric, yeah. Okay, commercial EVs, we talked about this before. I'm convinced it will happen faster. I've talked to people from fleets. Okay, they do the math. If it costs them less, they're gonna go electric.
Most of the delivery service like DHL or whatever,
Amazon, UPS.
BLS and all that,
Yeah.
like are basically 100% switching right now
Yeah.
in their fleet. I know we got a couple of contracts like VIQ to do all the fleets for some of them. So they're moving now.
Yeah, the only thing what's slowing it down is availability of product, right? There wasn't too much, but like I showed in a presentation a few months back, when I last checked, every single OEM that builds trucks, except for Western Star, which is sort of like the redneck of truck, all of them either have EV models in market or were coming up with EV models imminently. Some of them have ranges in the 500 to 600 kilometers, right? So if you're talking about places like Europe, they have to stop after 5 hours, right? So, and they have to stop for at least half an hour. So even the time they take to charge is not an issue. I think it's still not an issue in North America because if you do the math and see how much you save driving electric on maintenance and fuel cost, you know, if you save more than the time you pay for the person to wait for the charge to happen, you're making money. Why wouldn't you do it, right? And if you look at the numbers are actually, they're so interesting that people are going to go electric, right? So in the energy sector, this is the other part where we burn lots of fossil fuels, right? Everybody is going solar. And if you look at solar and wind, right? So if you look at the Chinese in particular, the transition is happening extremely rapidly, okay? If we didn't have some politicians here, like in Alberta, where Alberta. So actually, I heard something today, someone talking about Saskatchewan and talking about, he visited a place where they were putting huge windmills and it's so freaking windy where they put the windmills that they had problems installing them because for the crane to hoist it up. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so.
More windmills, slow down the.
Yeah.
No, the windmills make the wind.
Yeah. And so it's transition happening very fast, right? So, but if you're forecasting things like when we first came out with a forecast in 2017, people looked at our forecast and essentially you could tell they were saying, you're a freaking idiot. You don't know what the hell you're talking about, right?
I'm used to that.
Right? So, but so if you look at people who are like Bloomberg New Energy Finance or the International Energy Agency, they have people who are paid big bucks to do these forecasts. And our forecast is better than theirs, okay? Why is it? Well, we could talk about it for a while, but they will,
I should have sold.
well,
Man, this is why being a public servant sucks.
I tried to figure out how to monetize it, but I can't figure out a way to do it. But anyways, bottom line is that they systematically will underestimate the pace of change for a bunch of reasons. One of the reasons is they don't want to get the reaction we got that, you know, you're smoking dope here. That's impossible, okay? So, but they sorry? So anyways, so, you know, you look at China, and China is interesting because they've deployed so much solar and wind last year that one of the organizations, Carbon something, they determined that they think that China will have peaked emissions in 2023, 7 years before their commitment in Paris. So 9 years ago, they committed to peak in 2030. They probably peaked last year, okay? And the deployment is accelerating, and they have a glut of production capacity for solar cells, right? So prices are going to keep dropping, okay?
Don't they have a lot of coal still?
Okay, let's talk about that after, but they do, but they don't use coal as much as you would think they
They
would.
use coal like a peaker plant,
Yeah, and
like a peaker plant, so they use it as like a filling
Okay.
in rather than the base load like we do.
yeah, like we use gas plants here for that, and we use coal. It's a bit weird, but that's what they do.
Whatever, they're shutting them down. They're really too expensive.
They are too expensive, yeah. So the transition will happen faster than most people think, okay? Okay, Canada's emissions, by the way, fossil fuels alone are 25 to 30% of our emissions. So if you look at the commitments the government have made, if oil prices drop because of a drop in demand, well, there's a lot of production in Alberta that gets killed, right? So a lot of our emissions at the Canadian level drop, right?
Good.
And actually, about 15% of the energy we use worldwide is for fossil fuel production, processing, and transportation. Okay, 40% of emissions from shipping are from transporting fossil fuels. Okay? So when we stop doing fossil fuel stuff, we get ancillary benefits, right? Okay, so is it fast enough? Well, what's fast enough? Right? The idea is we need to do it as fast as we possibly can. Okay, let's drop this. So there's really no specific date or specific temperature that's really a hard, fast rule. Okay, so there's a talk about 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, right? But those are arbitrary numbers. Okay, the problem with that is that there's tipping points that might come into play. So the more the temperature goes up, the more there could be a tipping point like the Greenland melting all of a sudden, okay? Which will have a major amplification of the phenomenon we're seeing, right? The AMOC here, the Atlantic Meridional returning circulation, it's already slowed down by something like 20%, okay, because of climate change. So that's one where that would affect the weather significantly, because the reason Europe and the UK in particular are warm and warmer than here is because of that current bringing heat from the equator up to there. Okay, so bottom line though is we need to accelerate as much as possible. 1.5 is better than 2. 2 is better than 2.5. 2.5 is better than 3. Right. So everything we could do in our own lives or through our other activities will make a difference. Right. We just need to accelerate things as much as we possibly can. Okay. So I'll skip this here. This is Mark Jacobson. There's an interview he did where he has a lot of interesting numbers that repeat some of what I said there. You've seen these books before. If you're concerned about climate change, I would encourage you to read the last book there, Not the End of the World.
It's not the audio book because she's Scottish and it's
painful.
I made that mistake.
I love her accent though.
I know, but it's so hard to listen.
Yeah. But anyway, so very, very good book if you want to understand what the data says. Okay, so she uses data from our world in data where she works to show how we're progressing, and things are a lot better than most people think. But she doesn't, pretend that there isn't lots of work to do, right? So
Thanks, Raymond.
All right, good. Hey, pull them out.
Yeah,
No.
the news.
No questions. We lost a bunch of people on.
We may not have enough
We don't have time for questions. That's what the roundtable's for.
Okay, get into the news. Oh yeah, one other news item that's not in the list, but maybe of interest to anyone who has a Leaf. You actually can now buy CCS to Atom adapters that aren't too sketchy from like A2Z EP. Unfortunately, it's really expensive. It's like $1,400. So probably not even really worth it, but it's an option, especially if you have just a new one like 62 kilowatt hour Leafs, maybe it's worth it. If you have a really old one,
What's
probably not.
What speed are you getting with that?
The Leaf is.
The adapter is actually good to up to 100 kilowatts.
Okay.
Yeah, the Leaf-
The Leaf doesn't do 100, so it doesn't matter.
It's the speed of the Leaf, which is all that matters. So an interesting piece of news, and it's to do with California. It'll probably affect all of us. It's a small detail, but they're going to mandate that all electric vehicles have important data available to the end user in ways that are very accessible. So kind of like how a car has an odometer that gives you valuable information about how much wear and tear is on the car. They're mandating that you can view, how much energy has gone in and out of the car's battery, what's the state of health of the battery, and stuff like that. Like there's a few other data points, but those are kind of the important things. And that you'd be able to see that information on the screen of the car without any diagnostic tools. And then they're requiring other data points through diagnostic tools on top of that as well. I don't know off the top of my head exactly what they are, but most likely manufacturers will implement these features and just roll them out to all of their North American models and not just limit it to California, because it would just be easier to do that for most of them. Electrify America is starting to address some of their congestion issues. So this is typically at like stations in urban centers where you have a lot of Uber drivers or people who don't have home charging or use Electrify America. One thing that promotes this type of usage is that there were a lot of Volkswagen ID4 and Hyundai i5 buyers who got like a year or 2 years of free charging that came bundled with their car. And so they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to charge at Electrify America all the time because it's free for 2 years.
Even if I can change it to charge at home, right?
Yeah, even if they can charge at home. So they'll plug in and let the car charge all the way to 100%, which as anyone who's experienced EV driver knows, past like 80-ish, 80 to 90%, it trickles down to a really, really slow speed. So Electrify America is going to be requiring in these types of locations, you can't go above 85, but it's not going to be, too much of an issue for being able to get to your destination. They're not going to be pushing this rule over remote locations. So like, they're only be doing this at a place where there's tons of other chargers around. And so, yeah, should help ease congestion. So I put this here honestly because it's funny, but Trump vows to end the EV quote unquote mandate. It's unclear what he means by this because there is no actual EV mandate. So probably just saying stuff to rile up his base.
He wears a tampon this
year. I mean, in the same breath, well, not in the exact same breath, but he was all like praising Elon Musk for giving him money at one of his rallies, and everyone cheered for Elon Musk, even though they're apparently anti-EV. I don't know. The whole thing is very confusing to me.
But it's for Twitter. You praising him for Twitter.
Yeah. Rivian R2 pre-orders have passed 100,000 units. Nice. There were actually the majority of that happened on the first day after the unveiling, 68,000, but after 4 months, it's jumped up to over 100,000 at this point. So lots of latent demand, and like RJ Scringe has been, he's actually a great communicator. He goes on like a lot of podcasts and stuff. So I was listening to one where he was talking about latent demand of different product segments. And I mean, he raised a good point, like a lot of EVs are very similar to the Model Y or the Model 3. We haven't really expanded out past those kinds of varieties yet. This is going to be a more boxy vehicle that's going to appeal to a different segment than the Model Y, which is great. And hopefully we have lots of other options soon.
I'm still waiting for my EV off-roader.
So really funny story. That a Chevy dealer decided to test out the safety system on the Silverado EV's front trunk. And so he put his hand, and then the other guy behind the camera pressed the button to close the trunk, and the trunk started moving, and then it stopped because he had his hand there. I don't know how it detected his hand. And then the guy behind the camera was like, "Oh, I have to hold the button," which is how you override the safety.
So it did
check.
work, it's just he's an idiot.
And then he's like, okay, I'll hold down the button. And then the trunk door starts coming down, goes onto his hand. And then a second later, the like soft close mechanism engages and starts crushing his hand. And that's the second picture. He's like grabbing, he's like, anyway, I don't think he actually lost his hand or anything, but probably
ended up in the hospital.
might have broken it. You know, if you're gonna test safety systems, like don't use your actual body part.
In the carrot. You know, what?
Hot
dog.
I mean, you chicken wings.
The chicken,
He used the potatoes.
you know,
Anyway,
Yeah, that's stupid.
there's no vaccine for that.
So Ford is still hard at work on their next generation platforms. Really excited to see what they come out with for the next F-150. It'll probably match or exceed what we're seeing with the Silverado EV. But yeah, they're pretty like understandably tight-lipped on this stuff because they don't want to Osborne affect their current vehicles. Yeah, so they've hired a whole bunch of ex-Tesla, ex-Rivian employees. They're pouring tons and tons of money into R&D. Like they're clearly really serious about it. What we're seeing right now is just the tip of the iceberg, right? We're a couple of years away from tons and tons of models coming onto the market. So it'll be exciting to see that when it comes out. And Ford's, publicly said we're going to try to aim to, meet the affordability levels of Chinese companies, which, well, it's ambitious, but got to aim towards something. Into
Difference. Why? Just their low labor costs.
That's part of it. There's other.
There's a lot of materials in China that they.
China's been investing in the transitions for 15 years now, and we've only just started.
Yeah, they also have
They have a 10-year.
subsidies as part of it. It's also like
Yeah,
just the supply chain being really close by, right? So things are
Well,
consolidating.
that's it. They
There's a more mature
they
market.
spent the last 15 years building a supply chain to
But
support.
part of it as well is that
We're playing catch up.
China has generally like more people go into like engineering degrees and stuff.
Yeah.
So like
No,
the
but
cost
they've
of
been
engineers there is really cheap. Like
It's not
compared
just
to.
that, though. I mean, it's the volume production they have. right?
Yeah, there's a bunch of reasons. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but yeah.
So ultimately, it was part of their plan for the past three
Yeah.
plans.
Part of why, Tesla can go make a gigafactory in Shanghai and the cars coming out of that factory are
Less than a year
built
later.
better than
Yeah.
the cars coming out of Fremont. A lot of it has to do with the fact that in China, and I'm not praising their education system because there's a lot of problems with it, but they do make it so that there's a lot more highly educated people compared to the US and Canada. And the US is making it so hard for people to get an education at
Well,
this
because
point.
so China prioritized EVs 15 years ago, and we didn't.
And so-
now, so that's why.
You build a big factory, you need like thousands of engineers to
prioritize
set things
something, it
up,
becomes an
build
issue.
things, calibrate things. So they're able to get that labor force together, and
It's
that's
all
a big part of it. So into our Tesla news. So there are like kind of a few news items in this slide that I just grouped together. But basically, what happened first is that Elon Musk announced he was going to be contributing $45 million a month to
Bond.
Donald Trump's campaign. Yeah. And then I guess as to try and give reasoning as to why he's doing this, he said, well, if he had, if Trump wins, I want to be backing the winner. I want to, get favors from all the kind of the same reasons any corporation backs a political candidate. But he explicitly says, yeah, I think this will, hurt our competitors more than it hurts Tesla, which is a really, horrible thing to say, considering that he's spouted off about how Tesla's goal is to advance, sustainable transportation in general.
Literally their mission.
It's literally their mission. So he's like, he's just moving farther and farther away every day from what Tesla's supposed to be about. I don't know when he's going to finally get pushed out, if ever, or if he's going to just drag the company out.
He might just die from ketamine overdose.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Let's hope he wakes up tomorrow morning and it's suddenly like, oh my God, I've been going crazy these past few years. Like, no.
The bottom line, the excuse is he was engaging in corruption.
Yeah. Anyway, he ended up pulling out. Someone's microphone is on. All right. So he ended up backing out from this contribution. Could it be because of the backlash? Could it be because, political tides are changing? It doesn't really look as much like Trump is going to be the winner anymore. But who can say? So some Canada-specific news to do with Tesla. The Cybertruck has been granted an exemption to our steer-by-wire regulations. So just basically because Transport Canada needs time to update the regulations. And so in the meantime, there's like, yeah, you can kind of go ahead. But they said, you have to give us like annual incident reports if anything goes wrong, and let us know if you're going to update the software to do anything to do with steering, basically. And so Cybertruck should be available for sale sometime soon. Some more evidence coming out that unsurprisingly, hardware 3 is probably not going to support full self-driving at its mature state. The newest version of FSD is starting to just roll out to hardware 4. It's claimed that it'll come to hardware 3 eventually with optimizations, but it's hard to see how they will manage to keep shoehorning in more optimizations when it gets to the point where hardware 4 is going to support ultimately another 8x increase in parameters compared to what's in the newest version of FSD, which is already a 5x increase in parameters over the previous version of FSD. And of course, they've already announced hardware version 5, which is going to have even more powerful computing. So shouldn't be like too surprising to anyone. I mean, obviously, if they're iterating on hardware, they're iterating for a reason. And if the hardware was sufficient, they wouldn't be changing it, right? That's just kind of just logic. Tesla unveils render of their upcoming semi-factory. And it's not just a render. Actually, that kind of headline made it sound like, oh, they're just rendering things. They are actually they've already broken ground. And so they say it'll be producing semis in the end of next year, and they're hoping to wrap up to 50,000 units a year, which is like a lot more than I think they've made less than 100 semis so far. They're just making them by hand. And that's it. Cool.
So we'll try to whiz through this so that we can leave it up in time. So past events, we did a few kilowatts and coffee. Those are the ones there. So we also did on June 25th. Mike did a presentation to the Ottawa Cluster Environment Group. Sorry?
This is last month's. You already talked about this.
No, this was after me. I think it was the 24th. So I checked that carefully. So this is the presentation that Paul Martin did for K-Core, which I would invite you guys to look at. He talks a lot about hydrogen and why it's not a good idea and a bunch of other stuff like that. There's some things similar to what I said tonight. We did Westport, 17 test drives, which was more than I was expecting. Sam was busy just about the whole day. And I was busy probably a half, maybe.
The bulk went out, everybody went out at least once.
Yeah.
And only one convoy.
But
Yeah.
Yeah, let's not talk about that. But anyway, so I think it was a reasonably good event, and I'm thinking
very good event, just a little far.
Yeah,
it is a bit far. Yeah. And actually, I forgot to plug my car the night before, which anyways, but managed.
Still made it home. What's the trailer?
So July 28th, yesterday, we were at the Cumberland Heritage Museum for a few hours there. So interesting event. Had not a huge amount of people go around, but good conversations with a number of them. So that's it for events last month. Now, next meeting here, the 26th. Kilowatts and Coffee, there's only 2 this upcoming month. So this weekend on Merivale, and then IKEA on August 31st. The other weekends, we have something else, right? So that first weekend, August 10th, we're going to do a poker run. This is for us at EVCO and friends of EVCO. So we'll figure it out. So
Except for the test.
So we're thinking of inviting people from ZEVIP, for example, which we know very well and worked with them before. So so essentially, I think it says they're 234 kilometers. Should take about 4 hours and some, and it'll be like a
Figure about 250 kilometers. We start at the Electrify Canada at Coventry Road. So this way, if you know that you're driving far to get to us, please get there early so you can charge to start.
Yeah.
But at 8:30, we start from there. We will go through the Gatineau Hills, Cantley, then through Gatineau to go along the 148 all the way to Grenville, cross at Hawkesbury, and then come back on the 174. We will give you guys a map and send it all, by the way.
Did you check on when they're all open? Sorry, did you check all those roads are open? Yeah, I mean, that part of way is not open on Saturdays.
We'll check it.
Of the
Gatineau Park
parkway,
is open.
so it's open one way.
Was the?
Oh,
We'll take that.
not to, okay, yeah, that's it's Montreal Road to get to the airport. You can still get to the airport. Yeah, you.
Oh, this part here,
Yeah,
you're saying,
that part,
yeah.
yeah.
Also, most of Gatineau Park is closed.
Actually,
other than some.
it is in the late afternoon. At
Anyways,
open.
we're gonna look into that and figure out, we're gonna end at the aviation museum.
Yeah, and then, which is close to the Chargers again, so if you need to charge to go home, there's no problem.
Yeah, and we'll do lunch after for those who wanna participate.
If you do have a leaf, this might not be an event for you. It's gonna be very tough. Just want to say, the rest of the cars should have no problem. There is some charging along the way, but at one point, the finish line, like when we have a majority of cars, we end up overrun, and there will be a prize for the winner. And we will send all the info via email, or sorry, not email, but social media.
Are we gonna have little flags, the EVCO?
No,
Honk our horns all the way.
no, you can honk them with horns if you want, that's really up to you.
We've done stuff like that before, by the way, with.
But we would like, probably to take a few, group pictures with all the cars, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
If you know people that do have EVs, that want to participate, that's great. If you know someone that doesn't have an EV that wants to participate, as a volunteer, we do need a few people at some spots. So just get in contact with Sam or Raymond, and we will, be on the volunteer list.
Yeah, so we're expecting what, 15 to 25 people, somewhere around
I
there.
would say 15 up, depending on, LAVEC and all that. And depending also if it's an actual.
So, and this is for fun, this is just for once do something.
Should have something that we drive our EVs instead of just coming to somewhere and parking them.
Yeah. So now that you took up all that time, I'll move on.
I took a lot less time.
I know, just teasing. So, the August 17th, actually, we met with Mackenzie Motors in Renfrew. They're a GM dealer and they want us to do an event. So what we'll do is we'll do an event where we bring some of our cars for test drives, but we'll also use some of their cars for test drives. These are today that they have on the lot. Today they have others.
They have a Silverado,
Yeah.
they have a Hummer in both flavors.
Yeah, yeah.
They have a Blazer, they're gonna let us drive whatever we want.
And we will do the test drives with the people who are wanting to do test drives, okay?
Yeah, so if you wanna do test drives, you don't wanna use your car, this is the event for you.
Okay? Renfrew's not that far.
If you want to do test drives, there is a little, if you never did the test drives, there's a little class we gave there, the little
Yeah,
video
the little
that you have to do before you are able to give out test drives.
So if you haven't become a volunteer yet, email volunteer@co.ca
Yeah, and we'll get back to you.
and we'll get back to you.
So, and we'll also do some presentations inside. We need to figure out
Yeah.
the schedule there, but it should be interesting.
It'll be fun.
They will be advertising on the radio
Yep.
and all that. So,
And they only have 3 salespeople in the whole dealership, so they're like, can we not use our salespeople to do test drives? And we're like, oh, good, we prefer that anyway. So,
yeah, and
So
they're
they're
very
very-
keen. They're very keen.
And you've missed an opportunity. No problem, but it will cost you.
yeah,
We don't want to do
they
that.
offered us
You
t-shirts.
know, but we can use cars sometimes and, you know.
So that actually, he offered to Mike
Yeah.
to borrow a car if he wants to.
Yeah.
It might be a good idea to get familiar with the cars, but anyways.
Silverado, I got it.
So, next event after that is Capital Pride, so that's 2 days, we're doing 2 days this year.
We're doing 2 events on that day.
Yeah.
It's on the Friday, so yes, there are 2 events on the Saturday. But Pride is 2 days, 12 to 8, and the way I have it in the spreadsheet, there's shifts, okay? So if you can't make it for the whole day, it's a long day, 8 hours, right? You could choose a shift, it'll be on Bank Street, not sure exactly where yet. we are gonna have space for a car and a booth. Okay, so I made arrangements so that we could have enough space for the car. And James has volunteered to be the first car there.
If it's back from the
It should be.
Wrap shop.
the rat
It
shop,
should be.
yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, it should be back. If it's not, we'll figure it out, right? So the same Saturday, Queensway Community Music Festival and Family Fun Day. So we'll have just a booth there and a few cars. And actually, we will use, we'll use the car, to power one of the bouncy castles, okay?
Oh, I don't know where that idea came
Yeah.
Here.
Actually, it did come from him.
So we tried to also power the ice cream truck, but
Yeah.
he doesn't know how to use.
Yeah,
power.
Yeah, he's got this diesel generator that's very noisy and smelly and all that he's gonna be running, so anyways. We tried, you haven't contacted him, have you? No?
Well, no, after the email, he's
Is that, he doesn't wanna bother, I think,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, anyways, it'd be nice if you could do his thing too, because that thing is gonna be
yeah, he's
noisy and, yeah.
Obnoxious and noxious.
So this is 11 to 7, okay? So what I intend to do is 11 to 7. The other one, what's the other one again? Well, that's not gonna work, because what I want to do is drop stuff in town and then go there after. I'll figure it out.
Before, I'm on that one.
Yeah, but after 7 PM, I want to be there too, this place. I'll take the trailer, we'll get the stuff downtown for the night, okay? So anyways, details that we'll work out later. So September 4th, we are doing something at the Tanglewood Community Center, so we'll do test drives and have a booth there. Just booth? No test drives?
We won't really have a drop-off zone to be able to do test drives.
Okay.
Just because of the geography of the place.
Okay, because I thought they had said they wanted to, we had 4 spots for that, no?
4 spots for cars, like
Cars,
okay,
okay,
not display cars, but then they're gonna be blocked by all the like parked cars on the side of the road.
okay,
It
so.
won't be like easy to get in and out.
Okay, so I'll change the spreadsheet so to reflect that. Okay, so, that's September 4th. September 18th, this is, I'll be going to, Morton to do the presentation with, Carell. EVO 101 presentation. Morton is a bit past Westport, so,
Charge your car.
Charge your car, then
yeah, I don't need to bring a trailer either, right? So,
Yeah.
and I have Perth on the way, which is very convenient. Anyways, then after that, Carp Fair, we don't have confirmation yet, we still need to contact them, figure out what we could do. But we would like to be at Carp Fair. And then we have the SmartNet Coalition EV Showcase, which unfortunately, will be at the Just Food Farms. I say unfortunately, because it's not a great location, there's not good traffic.
For us in that
Right.
same area.
Well, that was a different thing. The event we did last year was something different, right?
No, what I'm saying is this year it's the second event that we
You know,
have in Pittsburgh.
Yes. And Lansdowne was fantastic because we had all sorts of foot traffic, people just going through because they were doing stuff in that area, right? So it was just a fantastic venue, but unfortunately, SmartNet Coalition, I think last year's event wasn't very profitable for them. So they're scaling it down, okay? So, anyways, we'll see what we do. I don't think we'll put more than a few cars and do some test drives and talk to people, okay? Membership, so if you're not a member, please subscribe.
Well, we have the new memberships too there.
Well, is it, oh, I never
That's
talked
they're
about that.
plugged in, the charging, the fast charging. We, instead of having the one fixed rate for everyone, if you want to basically donate more, there's 3 levels of subscription. And we are working to have little packages of benefits towards each branch of money that you give us.
Okay,
So
so.
I pay for fast charging, can I put Raymond on a dunk tank? And-
I'm down with this.
Last call at the bar if you need some.
Why did you? Anyways, so next thing is our website, right? No, sorry, our YouTube channel. I didn't check today, but I think we have a bit more than 9,000 subscribers. Please subscribe, and that always helps to make us more visible.
Yeah, to 100 subscribers.
Well,
Smash that bell.
it's nothing about subscribers, right? But it'd be nice if we could leverage these videos. If you have people who are asking questions about EVs, there's videos.
We don't just have our meetings, we have like
EV?
presentations we've done and
Yeah,
stuff, so.
yeah. And,
Myth
and,
busting and all kinds of good stuff.
yeah, and I would like to do more, but we'll see where that goes. Yeah, so we're trying to make it a resource for people who want to have information on EVs. One of the things I would like to see is, I just bought a car, so my friend bought an i5.
Yeah.
What do I do now? How do I charge? How much should I charge? All this stuff. It's not hard, but if you don't know it, you don't know it, right? Okay.
On my trip to Toronto, I had to help a lot of people.
Right, so I think there's a real need for that, and there may be an opportunity to work with dealers and tell them, hey, you got someone who's just buying an EV, just tell them to go here and they'll have some information. Okay.
All right, so if you're watching live, stick around for the roundtable, even though there's like 3 of you left. If you're watching online on YouTube, this is where your video ends. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next month. Like, comment, and subscribe. Smash that bell, the like button.